There's one thing Virgo does better than any other sign. They see what others miss, the invisible details, the microscopic inconsistencies, the patterns that no one else noticed. Their mind is literally built to perceive what's out of place. And yet, with all that ability, there is a specific type of sign that Virgo learns to ignore. Not because it didn't arrive, because it arrived too early, before she had enough arguments to take it seriously. This video isn't about signs that a relationship is bad. Everyone talks about that. This video is about what happens inside Virgo before that. The internal mechanism that transforms clarity into doubt, that transforms certainty into analysis, that transforms the most accurate warning she's ever received into just another thing she needs to verify before trusting. Because what God tries to tell Virgo about a man doesn't usually come with an explanation. And Virgo, who has learned all her life that what lacks explanation isn't trustworthy, already has her filter on even before listening. What you are about to understand about yourself will be unsettling, and it will make perfect sense. There's something nobody talks about regarding Virgos. They talk about them being perfectionists, organized, and never forgetting a detail. But nobody talks about that moment, that very specific moment, when a Virgo looks at a man and something inside her says, "No, not this one, not like that." And she analyzes. She doesn't run away. She doesn't scream. She sits with that feeling and begins to dissect it. "Maybe it's my insecurity. Maybe I'm exaggerating." He explained, "It makes sense. I need to be fair." And the small voice, that voice that came first, before any thought, is being folded, filed away, silenced with the precision that only Virgo has for things she prefers not to face now. This is not naivete. Naivete is not seeing. A virgin sees everything. The problem is what she does with what she sees. There's a system within Virgo that's been built up over years, perhaps an entire childhood, that has learned that feeling without proof is dangerous, that reacting before understanding is impulsive, that the right thing to do is always wait for more data. And this system, which works beautifully in almost every area of her life, becomes a trap when it comes to a man who knows very well how to present himself. Because he doesn't need to hide anything from Virgo. He only needs to give her enough material so that she herself can build his defense. And she does. God, how she builds. With impeccable logic. With arguments that any outsider would find reasonable. With that ability to see multiple perspectives that makes her extraordinarily fair, and in this specific case, extraordinarily vulnerable. The warning had already come. Sometimes it came on a night when she couldn't sleep without knowing exactly why. Sometimes it came in a short phrase he said that she heard with a strangeness that lasted seconds. And then she herself dismissed it because after all he was tired, after all she may have misinterpreted it. Sometimes the warning came from outside. A friend who said something that Virgo heard and filed away as jealousy or someone else's exaggeration. And sometimes the warning came in a way that Virgo can't quite name. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't exactly an emotion. It was more of a certainty that settled upon her for a few seconds, silent, clear, without explanation. And she didn't know what to do with something that had no argument. So she did what she knows best. She thought until the certainty turned into doubt. What no one tells Virgo is that these moments, those instants when something simply feels right, are not emotional weakness. They are not disguised anxiety. They are not the insecurity she so fears having. They are information. They are the most precise type of data that exists, and they arrive before any logic because they don't need logic to be real. But Virgo has been taught by life, by past relationships, by her own brilliant mind, to only trust what she can explain. And the problem with divine warnings is that they rarely come with documentation. And now you're here, in this discomfort. acknowledging something that perhaps has never been named so directly. That warning that arrived and that you transformed into self-doubt, not doubt about it. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a book about relationships in the usual sense. It's about the inner map of Virgo, about how this extraordinary mind can learn to work for itself instead of against itself, about developing true discernment, not the kind that analyzes to exhaustion, but the kind that recognizes clearly and acts with courage. For Virgo, this isn't an abstract concept. It's a skill they can hone, and this book shows how. You're at the exact point in the video where the internal wiring starts to make sense. It's the most fertile moment to absorb something that goes beyond the content, something you can take into your real life. Not tomorrow, when the discomfort has passed and your mind has already found another justification. Now, the link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And while you do that, or while you decide, I want to leave you with a question for the comments. What was the last warning you received about a man that you chose not to heed? You don't need to go into detail, but write it down. Sometimes naming it is the first step. But then what happens when Virgo finally stops analyzing and starts feeling? What happens when she allows her body to say what her mind was refusing to process? That's where things get unsettling, because Virgo's body knows. It always knew. That tension in her shoulders that appeared every time she waited for a message that took longer than it should. That sleep interrupted for no reason the night after a date that went well. That physical sensation, almost nausea but not quite, when his name appeared on the screen in a way she didn't expect. The body is a measuring instrument. Virgo knows this intellectually. She has read about it, she understands the concept, but there is a huge difference between understanding that the body holds signals and trusting them as valid data. For Virgo, trusting something that doesn't pass through the filter of reason still seems, deep down, irresponsible. It seems like giving into chaos. It seems like being the person she never wanted to be, the one who reacts without understanding. So she trained. She trained for years to silence what the body says when what the body says doesn't have enough argument. And this training, which came from a very legitimate place of wanting to be rational and fair, ended up producing something she didn't realize, the ability to become alienated from the most precise signal she has. There's a type of man, and he doesn't have to be obviously bad, who finds Virgo precisely at this point of vulnerability. He doesn't need to deceive an inattentive woman. He needs a very attentive woman who will listen to every word, who will analyze every behavior, who will give him the benefit of the doubt with intellectual seriousness. Because with this woman, he knows he can get time to explain, time to reposition himself, time for her logic to do the work he needs to do. And Virgo gives that time, because it is fair, because it doesn't want to be unfair, because the idea of having wronged someone hastily disturbs it more than the idea of having stayed too long on something that wasn't working. This is real. This is not a weakness of character. It is a very specific distortion that stems from a genuine virtue, Virgo's commitment to justice, and which, in relationships, can become the longest path back to itself. This distortion that has just been described, using one's own intelligence to build a prison, is at the heart of it all. And when Virgo finally recognizes this, the natural impulse is, what now? How do I undo something that has been built so deeply? The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, was written for this exact moment. It doesn't offer generic rules of self-knowledge. It delves into the inner architecture of Virgo, into its relationship with discernment, with confidence, and with how it learns to honor what it knows without needing to justify it to itself. Because Virgo's path to clarity is not about learning to feel less. It's about learning to recognize when what it feels is more accurate than any argument the mind can construct. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's something very specific that happens in a Virgo's body when she's in a situation that isn't right for her. It's not drama. It's not an emotional breakdown. It's almost the opposite. It's a kind of background noise that she learns to ignore because it's too constant to be an alarm. A tension she attributes to work, a tiredness she justifies with the rush of daily life, a lack of appetite she resolves with discipline, a cry that comes from nowhere on a Sunday afternoon and that she quickly stops because she doesn't have time for it, because it doesn't make sense now, because she's fine. She is fine. Virgo is extraordinarily good at being well. It's almost a skill. She's learned that life works best when she functions well, so she functions. She organizes, she plans, she solves. And in the midst of all this, her body tries to say something that doesn't fit into any of her boxes. This man is costing me energy that I'm not allowed to spend. Because for Virgo, spending emotional energy without logical justification seems like a waste. And if she still doesn't have proof that he's no good, if he hasn't yet done that indisputable thing, that thing she needs to be sure, then the tiredness she feels must be her own. It must be her way of being. It must be something she needs to work on. And so the body is interpreted in reverse. The warning sign becomes evidence that she needs to improve something about herself. Exhaustion becomes a self-development project. And the man remains there, perfectly intact in her analysis of him, while she diminishes. This is where things get too important to continue at the astrological level, because it's not about Virgo being naive. It's not about her being incapable. It's about the fact that she has been trained by herself, by the world, by previous relationships that taught her to question herself, to trust more in self-doubt than in certainty about him. What has just been described, the exhaustion that Virgo turns against itself, is one of the most silent and costly patterns it carries. And the solution isn't in learning to detach or trust more. It's in understanding how the Virgo body is programmed to communicate what the mind avoids. The book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, has a specific path for this, about how Virgo can learn to read its own physical and emotional signals as reliable data, not as flaws to correct. It's an internal reorientation, not a list of rules. And for Virgo, which needs real substance to change something structural, this kind of depth makes all the difference. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a type of man who doesn't fool Virgo with blatant lies. That man would be detected in seconds. She has an eye for inconsistency, for logical contradiction, for the detail that doesn't add up. That's not the kind of man Virgo needs to worry about. The man she needs to recognize is the one who has learned, consciously or not, that to have Virgo on his side, he needs to appeal to the thing she values most: reason, logic, fairness. This man explains. He always has an explanation. Not aggressive, not defensive, careful explanations that take her point of view into account, that acknowledge the validity of her concerns before gently dismantling them. He asks for more time with arguments that Virgo can't refute without seeming unfair. He uses her vocabulary back at her, and Virgo, who has always been the more articulate person in the relationship, suddenly finds herself being convinced by her own language. This isn't usually a premeditated plan. Sometimes it's simply that this man has learned in previous relationships that with certain women, the most effective approach is careful persuasion. And Virgo, with her intelligence and pursuit of equality, is the perfect candidate for this mode of operation. The most disturbing thing isn't the man. The most disturbing thing is the moment when Virgo realizes that the internal debate she had, that long, solitary debate in which she weighed the pros and cons, in which she considered all perspectives, was a debate she lost before it even began. Because the terms of the debate were set by him, and she entered it without realizing it. It's not humiliation. It's recognition, and recognizing that is the first step towards something no debate can provide, the clarity that comes before argument, the signal that doesn't need convincing to be accepted. Recognizing this pattern of having one's own terms used against oneself is one of the most difficult and liberating revelations a Virgo can have. But recognition isn't enough if it isn't accompanied by a new way of internally guiding oneself. The book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, directly addresses what happens when Virgo's intelligence learns to work with discernment instead of replacing it, how it can use its analytical capacity to confirm what it already feels, not to argue against it. For Virgo, this is a silent revolution. It's not about shutting down the mind. It's about adding a layer that it has been taught to ignore, and that is, in fact, the most reliable of all. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a moment Virgo knows. She may never have described it this way, but she knows. It's the moment when she finally acts on what she's known for months, when she makes the decision that the first sign had already made for her long before. And this moment always comes with a strange, almost serene clarity that she didn't expect to feel, mixed with something that hurts in a different way than she imagined. It's not the pain of losing him. It's the pain of realizing how much she knew, how clear the warning was, and how hard she tried not to heed it. Virgo is very hard on herself in normal situations. Imagine in this one, the immediate tendency is to transform recognition into self-criticism. How could I? Why didn't I see it before? What kind of person knows for so long and doesn't act? And this criticism, which is already all too familiar to her, is just another trap. Because the problem was never a lack of intelligence. The problem was what she did with the intelligence she has. But something happens on the other side of this process, when Virgo moves past the criticism and arrives at a clear understanding. She realizes that each time the warning came and she didn't heed it, it wasn't because she was weak. It was because she hadn't yet learned to treat that type of sign as reliable information. It was legitimate information in a format she didn't yet recognize as such. And that changes everything, because it's not a matter of character, it's a matter of learning. And Virgo, who no one learns like she does when she decides to learn, can change that. The next time the warning comes, she'll recognize it, not because it will be more obvious, but because she'll be more willing to accept that clarity doesn't need an argument to be real. Ultimately, what this entire video is trying to say is something very simple, which paradoxically is the hardest thing for Virgo to accept, that she already knew. She always knew. The question was never whether the signs existed. The question was whether she would allow herself to trust them without first turning them into arguments. And that permission, small, discreet, almost invisible, is where the power of Virgo truly resides. There is a difference between the virgin who analyzes everything to protect herself and the virgin who trusts her feelings before analyzing. The first lives in a permanent state of alert disguised as control. The second has something that seems like peace, not because life has become simpler, but because she has stopped fighting against what she already knows. The warnings that arrive, those without argument, without rational explanation, that simply land upon her with a silent certainty, are not unprocessed emotion. They are not anxious about creating stories. They are the kind of clarity that the universe reserves for those who have the capacity to see beyond what is visible. And Virgo has this capacity. She has it in abundance. What she needs to learn is that using this capacity begins long before the first thought. It begins the moment she hears the small voice, and instead of silencing it says, "I hear you, and I will trust you," because God doesn't warn twice in the same way. Sometimes he warns once, in an instant that lasts less than a second, with a certainty that has no words. And that virgin who learns to receive this warning without needing justification, that virgin is no longer vulnerable. She is, finally, free.